ओके स्टार्ट। ओके ठीक है। So hi students, good morning. I know that I am late by 5 minutes. It was pretty a hectic week. So and at a time it did come to my mind that I could skip this class, but then people like someone like Ajinkya Jadhav, he would have simply asked the question that, sir, would you continue or have you stopped it? So even if one student is interested in this initiative of ours, we are going to continue with it. Okay. So as usual, first the what should I say, ritualistic information. This PDF I have made available on @IR this week. So you can download it from this Telegram channel. Okay. And we'll be going through and well, you see, in this week there were not too many events. First one was the demise of Queen Elizabeth II, and a lot happened around that only. And then there was a meeting of the SCO, head of states, head of governments. There were chances that perhaps there would be a meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping, but that did not happen. But there was a meeting with President Putin, then Erdogan from Turkey, then with Iran, Ibrahim Raisi, the president of Iran. So let us look at some of the first we'll be looking at the previous week questions and its answers, then some of the important pieces of information this week, and then we will be going to discuss the questions that came in yesterday's paper in GS2, particularly with respect to IR. And in that PDF I have actually given some of the clips, some of the snapshots of my own notes that I had given to the students. There you will not find the watermark of the institute, because I could not get the actual watermarked institute's notes. So the Word document that I was having with me, I took a snapshot of that, and then I have pasted it in the PDF. I could also have shared the video, but searching for the video and that snapshot, that particularly clip, and then putting it on, that would have made very little sense. Plus a lot of time would have been needed for that. So perhaps video would come on the latter part of the month, or perhaps this month or next month. And yes, out of 4 questions, 3 were simply directly from the notes that I had given or what I had discussed or dictated in the class. Just 2 days back, one of the students, he called me and he said that, sir, since I am the student, please provide me with the notes that you have dictated. Then I talked to him a bit, and then I said that, while I was dictating, did you find any notes? Then he said, no sir, you were not looking to any notes. So that is what I am saying in this class as well. Whatever I am dictating, whatever I am explaining, please note that down. Please note that down. Because you do not know from which portion of the discussion there might be a question. So that is why, since the very first class, I have asked you people, despite providing this PDF, because in this PDF there is not too much information. There are some specific bullet points only. But apart from that, the other issues that I discussed, please note that down. And regarding that question number 19, I2U2, almost similar question I had discussed in the class. Go to the, what I should say, go to the second last slide, and in the very last line, look at that particular question. There were 2 more questions, but in the screenshot, this much was only coming. So that is why just look at that question, I2U2 related question. It was almost similar. Okay, we'll be discussing that later on, but let us first go to the previous week question. Okay. Yes. So the question was importance of Tamil issue in India-Sri Lanka relations. What has been the key demands of India in this issue? So when we talk about importance of Tamil issue in India-Sri Lanka relations, do not discuss it only from Indian perspective. You will have to bring in the Sri Lankan perspective, their concerns related to their territorial integrity, because that has been the biggest concern of Sri Lanka. You see, Sri Lanka is much smaller nation than India. Plus the northern and eastern region, that is a contiguous region. We have seen that in the last class. So there will always be a threat that since this northern region, it is so closer to India, there might be a chance that India might start interfering too much, and perhaps India would want this portion to cede away from Sri Lanka. So that has been the biggest concern of Sri Lanka. And that is why in recent times you will see that in every joint statement or in every statement with respect to Sri Lanka that India makes, India always underlines the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Sri Lanka, so as to convince Sri Lanka that all we want is for a dignified living, protection of human rights, protection of culture of Sri Lankan Tamils. India does not have any interest in secession of Sri Lanka. Okay. And next is key demands. You can simply bring that from the Rajiv Jayawardene Accord or Indo-Sri Lanka Accord 1987. So some of the solution pointers, let's just look at them. Importance of Tamil issue. From Sri Lankan side, this is the point. Territorial integrity. You see, Sri Lanka is something like this, right? And this whole region is, this is northern and this would be eastern. And somewhere here around is Trincomalee. Here would be Colombo. And this would be Hambantota. You see, whenever you read this, try to draw a map and locate various areas, so that in order to discuss, suppose a question is related to Sri Lankan Tamils or India Tamil issue, draw a map, shade this area and mention it northern and eastern areas. There are greater chances that this simple act will increase your marks by at least half. And then all this Colombo, Hambantota, Trincomalee, then here it is Jaffna. There can be a question in prelims that arrange all these areas or all these places in Sri Lanka from north to south or from east to west. For all such situations, this will be beneficial. Whenever you are reading about any specific topic, any specific issue, please draw a rough map, locate various areas so that to jog your memory. Okay. And in case there are any questions, please let them come in. I did not ask it in the very beginning, so please let them come. Okay. So this is the most important concern of Sri Lanka. Then regarding India, it is equal rights and dignity for Tamils. Then geopolitics of IR. You will explain this as increasing Chinese overtures and Indo-Pacific as a new construct. Okay. Then next one is India's domestic politics. In the last class we had discussed how Tamil parties, they had a constant demand to be that India should be more in favor of Sri Lankan Tamils rather than the Sri Lankan government. And that is why between 2004 and 2014, India-Sri Lanka relations, they were in a very poor state. We also saw the voting by India in 2012 and 2013 at UNHRC. If you can recall it, well and good. If you cannot recall it, please go back to the last week's notes and revise all this. That is why I gave this question, so that while discussing this question, the answer here, you can jog your memory, go back to the notes and just recall that what all I had read last week. So that will lead to double revision and ultimately improving your overall grasping of the issue and memorizing capability. How long you can recall this. Okay. Then India's domestic politics and success of neighborhood first policy. I have said this, but yes, I had said that first on how to approach IR for mains, and then in the mains IR classes, that please bring in the policy specific dimension, policy specific document. If we are talking about India Central Asia relations, always mention about connect Central Asia. West Asia, mention about link West Asia. About Indo-Pacific, or in case of Southeast Asia, mention about Act East policy. Okay. Then what are the key demands? Demands are very limited. The most important is implementation of 13th Amendment. And 13th Amendment is about devolution of power to the provinces. Sri Lanka at present, it is a centralized polity. The purpose is that if power is devolved to the provinces, provinces will be in a better position to protect the rights of their citizens. Because suppose in the northern region, in the Jaffna area, majority are Tamils. So if there is any local government or any provincial government, that government will be elected by majority Tamilians, I mean Sri Lankan Tamils. So they will be in a better position to take care of the interests of Sri Lankan Tamils. Just like in case of India, suppose had it been a centralized polity, had it been, fortunately it is not, do you think the central government would have been in a position to take care of the interest of someone from UP and someone from Kerala equally? The answer is no. Because you know, UP has got a bigger population, Kerala has got a very smaller population, or an even smaller state like Goa. So when there is a federal government, when there is a federation, the provincial governments, they are chosen by the population that is in majority of that specific area. So whatever government would come, they will be, since they will be elected by the majority of that particular grouping, majority of the population residing in that particular area, naturally they will have a mandate of protecting their interests. And that is why India has always called for devolution of power. And when India calls for devolution of powers, again for Sri Lanka the threat emerges of secessionism. That today they are asking about devolution of power. Tomorrow this might lead to secessionist tendencies. Just go back to India. First State Reorganization Commission. Why the states were not being reorganized? Because of that same threat. That regional tendencies, regional identities that will get strengthened, that will surpass the national identity, and perhaps the area will secede. Okay, so similar is the threat in case of Sri Lanka. Devolution of powers under 13th Amendment, unification of northern and eastern provinces. This was actually done by the Sri Lankan government. But in 2009, the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, they cancelled this unification. So this was unified by the Sri Lankan government, but that action of unification was nullified by the this Supreme Court. Okay, and then as usual, dignity and justice for Tamils. Question number 1 over. Now let us go to question number 2. In question number 2, you will have to be very careful in segregating that what are the key demands of the question and how that has to be addressed. Okay, like you see, the last part of the question, USA interests in Pakistan, we had discussed in the last class, and this is a direct question. This segment can be answered very easily. But prior to this question, prior to this portion, look at the first portion. It is a very big line, and in this big line you will have to find out what are the key demands so that I can break my answer accordingly and it can be answered. Okay, so let us read the question. USA's inability to hold Pakistan accountable. This is the first portion. USA's inability to hold Pakistan accountable. Part number 1. For support to terrorism has been a key challenge to strengthening of bilateral relations. Naturally, this is with respect to India. Or have I missed something? You can put it of Indo-US bilateral relations so that for more clarity. So this will be second portion. Key challenge to strengthening of bilateral relations, and this will be the third portion. Okay. So again, in one line only we had to decipher what are the key demands, and that is what we have done. First we will explain how USA has been unable to hold Pakistan accountable for terrorism. Then how that US inability has resulted in emerging as a key challenge to strengthening of India-US bilateral relations, and then this will be the third portion. Okay, so now let us look at the content. Just as I said, we have divided the question into three portions. The first portion is inability to hold Pakistan accountable, and you will have to substantiate this. Okay. First, Pakistan has continued to support Taliban. You can mention about Quetta Shura, from where Taliban was operating. Then UN proscribed terrorists and terror groups continue to roam with impunity. You can mention about Jamaat ul Dawa, Hafiz Saeed, etc., etc. Okay. Presently, regarding this Masood Azhar, Pakistan has been saying that presently he is not in Pakistan. Perhaps he has ran away to Afghanistan, and we will be taking strict action. And this is being linked to Pakistan's eagerness of coming out of that grey list of FATF. Okay, so this is the second, and the third one is cross-border terrorism in India. USA has not been able to hold Pakistan accountable for all these actions, and that proves that USA has been unable to hold Pakistan accountable. Now next comes, how is this going to impact India-US bilateral relations? How that can impact? Conflicting interests in South Asia. India wants that there should not be any terrorism, and all terror hideouts or all terror related territories from where terrorism is emanating, that should be ended. But what is US interest? US primary interest is not about ending terrorism. Though initially in 2001 it came to Afghanistan in the name of war on terror, but that is not the fact. because had had US been that much interested, it would not have differentiated between good terrorists and bad terrorists. US sole interest is that whatever terrorism is emerging from Afghanistan, that should not impact USA and its allies. And that was one of the key agreements of Doha Accord that was signed between USA and Taliban. And that is why at that time the question was raised that the term says USA and its allies. India is not US ally. So conflicting interests in South Asia, and naturally if you are unable to hold Pakistan accountable, who is continuously fomenting cross border terrorism against us, that would lead to mutual distrust. USA will say that why are you continuously, what should I say, not talking to Pakistan? Because if India starts talking to Pakistan, USA will have greater leverage over Pakistan. Pakistan continuously complains to USA that please force India, please ask India to talk to us. Previously, USA used to pressurize India, but now as India's economic might, its geopolitical profile has increased, and comparatively USA's profile has decreased. Now India has a greater maneuvering space. Next, doubts over US commitment against terrorism. That is why I discussed in the first point that if you are against terrorism, you will act against any nation, any entity that perpetrates terrorism. But you are not acting against Pakistan. So naturally there will be doubt about your commitments. And then what it is doing? Military support that USA is providing to Pakistan, naturally that will be a security threat for India. So these are all challenges related to bilateral relations. Okay, and then key areas of interest of USA in Pakistan. This was already discussed in the last class. You can go back to the notes, and these are the points from the notes only. Okay. No, I don't think this is from the notes. Perhaps there can be a similarity, but I have not copied from there and pasted it here. Okay. So, key areas of interest. The very first is that Taliban does not impact US interests. USA interest means interest of USA as well as its allies. Okay. Whatever was signed in the Doha Accord. Next is stabilizing Afghanistan. USA is much interested in that. Another is balancing South Asia. We had discussed it in the last class. And USA looks at Pakistan as a defense market. This one and this one simply linked. Okay. And also targeting terrorists in Afghanistan. You can give example of this Al Qaeda chief who was targeted recently. Okay. So these were the content from, these were the answers to the last week questions. And yeah, this week we do not have any question. All I would want you is to please try whatever questions that came in the mains yesterday. Okay. I will be discussing them, I will be explaining them, but please try them. Because these questions have been framed by me. You can have doubts that whether such type of questions will come. You might think them to either to be too easy or too difficult. So that is why I am asking you, please go back after the class, and that is why I am not giving any practice questions today. Go back after the class and try those 4 questions. Okay. USA has agreed to participate in Sri Lanka debt restructuring. US aid. US assistance for international development. its head Samantha Power. Last week she was in Sri Lanka. She met the US Sri Lankan government and she again praised about the protection of rights and ensuring justice to the Tamil population, those who were victim of the civil war that took place in Sri Lanka. And she said that we are going to participate, but at the same time she asked other nations, and by other nations specifically China, because a major portion of Sri Lankan debt is from China. So she asked that other nations, they should also cooperate. Now let us go to the backdrop of this. You see, Indo-Pacific is emerging as the key area of, what should I say, geopolitical interest in the region. India is there, China is there, US is there, now France and Germany, they'll also be there, Australia is there, Japan is there, all these nations are there. The location of Sri Lanka makes it a nation of too much interest, too much significance, because it is exactly at the sea line of connection between Persian Gulf and Strait of Malacca. You are looking at it? So that is why Sri Lanka is very much important. Initially, US had tried during Donald Trump's regime, during the last days of his tenure, Mike Pompeo, he had come to Sri Lanka, he had visited Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, then I think also Maldives, and they wanted to attract Sri Lanka in some sort of a partnership, and naturally that would have riled up China. So Sri Lanka did not take any such position, but now Sri Lanka is in need. So this gives US a greater leverage, because yet again Sri Lanka has gone to the IMF, and IMF naturally will act as per US interests. So that is one point. Another point is that through this, US is also trying to give other developing nations an indication that do not get into that Chinese arm. Otherwise this might happen, and look at this China presently, it is not even interested in restructuring the debt. Okay. And next is Australian Parliament passes bill to cut emission by 43% and then by 2050 net zero. There is a new government in Australia and they are quite serious about their environmental commitments. So this you can mention about an area of cooperation between India and Australia on climate change. Australia has a 2050 target, India has a 2070 target, and both these nations, they can cooperate on the issue. Between India and Australia, then you can talk about Quad. This can be a point in Indo-Pacific areas of convergence. So for all these nations, climate change can be an area of convergence. You can mention about, for example, Australia 2050, India 2070. Okay. So that is how you use all these points, just one or two liners. Naturally, on these points, you are not going to get a full-fledged question in the mains. But whatever questions you get, just mention all these points. Okay. So Iran wants India to buy crude just like Russia. Between roughly around 2007-2009, Iran was the second largest importer of crude to India. But then when sanctions came under before GSA because of Iran's nuclear activities, India slowly stopped. Later on, again after signing of JCPOA, it had started, and after Trump, it again got stopped. And Iran was the first nation with whom we had trade in our own local currencies. That was called a rupee real arrangement. Rupee for India and real for Iran. So that is what and after Trump's pressure, India simply did not buy oil. Now that is what Iran is saying, that if you can defy USA on Russia, why not defy USA on us also? And naturally, you would say that Iran is saying something correct. So why don't we go for that? So you see, Iran, Russia. Let us first understand the difference. Russia is an ex-superpower. Iran is not, and it is still a very significant military power. Yet again, Iran is not. At UNSC, it is among P5. Yet again, Iran is not. More than 60%, I am not telling it 70, because we have seen that continuously our overall share in our overall defense equipment, share of Russia is continuously declining. In our defense, more than 60% armament is Russian. So need for repairs or even spares, Russia is needed. But with Iran, we do not have any such interest. This is one set of comparison. So that is why always remember that international relations runs on the basis of needs, not on the basis of idealism or proportionality or something like that. We are engaging with Russia, we are not accepting what USA is saying or USA's position. Why? Because we know that Russia is so much important to us. For multipolar world, it is also important to us. That this is one set of argument. Next, let us talk about the geopolitics of West Asia. Okay. In West Asia, we have got Saudi and Israel, and at this side we have Iran. In recent times, we have seen that our relations with Saudi has improved significantly. Our relations with Israel, we have de-hyphenated Israel and Palestine. Next, we have gone for signing I2U2. So, if we get very much interested in Iran with respect to energy trade, naturally there will be objections from Saudi Arabia, because if Iran gets strengthened, naturally Saudi will be weakened, because these two are the regional rivals. But we do not want to unnecessarily antagonize Saudis. Suppose Iran comes out of sanctions, then naturally, since we have a policy of diversifying our overall energy trade, we will go for diversification and we will buy energy from Iran. But if presently we start purchasing that energy, which will mean that we are very strongly on the side of Iran. And if you are on the side of Iran, naturally Israel and Saudi will have objection, they will have doubts. So that is another factor why we are not presently purchasing that much energy from Iran. However, purchasing energy from Iran would have been cheaper. Why? Because of the distance, so logistical cost. Next, Iran is also providing its energy at discounted price. But in geopolitics, it's not the economy always, but it's about your overall balancing, how you balance your different interests, your different parts. Dr. Jayasankar says that from wherever we will get cheaper oil, we will buy it from there. Naturally, Iran is going to give you much cheaper. It will be even cheaper than Russian oil. Why? Look at the geographical distance, time consumed, and overall transportation cost. With respect to Iran, that would be even cheaper. So, but still we are not purchasing from Iran. That is why it is not only about economic decision. It is a geopolitical, it is always a geostrategic decision, whatever happens in international politics. Okay, this is one set of argument. Another set of argument is Iran and Russia on Kashmir. Russia has always been on our side. Iran has never been on our side. It has always said one thing or the another on Kashmir against India, that goes against India's interest and favors Pakistan interest. So if you are not sensitive to our interests, why we should be sensitive to your interest? So it's not always about from where I will get cheaper products. Now imagine we are getting energy from USA. Imagine the distance. But again, we have to do that. Why? Because at that time it was Trump. And he was more interested in trade. He termed India as tariff king, very high trade deficit. So in order to balance that, we had to buy it. So when you understand international relations, please understand all these complexities, because that's how international relations run. It is never that only one factor, just like Iran said that if you are buying from Russia, buy from us. The point is, we are ready to buy from you, but what purpose will it serve apart from being cheaper? And if we are talking about cheaper, we can even go to Venezuela. Perhaps Venezuela will provide us even cheaper energy. But then Venezuela is of very little geopolitical interest to us. So this is how international politics runs. Next is at UNHRC. I had discussed in the last class that after that report had come on Sri Lanka from the UNHRC, and that had linked human rights with economic development or present economic crisis. And this meeting is presently going on, where the assessment of human rights of all other nations take place. Then there will be, what should I say, a report on Sri Lanka. There will be voting, and as usual India will abstain, and that is given. If India does not abstain and India votes either in favor or in against, that will be a big surprise. Okay, so what has India said? Sri Lanka's lack of progress on solution to Tamil issue. Now there are two ways of looking at it. The first one is, despite our objections, Sri Lanka let that Yuan Wang 4 dock at Hambantota. So if you do something that goes against our interest, there will be a way to pinch you, and this is that pinching. One thing you can always say, that perhaps India is genuinely interested towards the Tamilian issue, that is a possibility. But I am talking to you from a realist perspective, because it is always about interests. So the first is that Yuan Wang and Yuan Wang's docking, India's objections, and this is a response to that. Then again, India's domestic politics. You see, BJP is trying to increase its foothold in Tamil Nadu. And if a BJP takes a position that is clearly too much inclined towards Sri Lanka and not that much in favor of Tamilian Sri Lankan Tamils, naturally that is going to impact BJP's electoral prospects. So, domestic politics is also another dimension. And Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe, he has asked his government, his secretaries, that whatever are the projects related to India, expedite them and as expeditiously as possible, give permit for them. So this is another way of, the one is that Sri Lanka is going through economic crisis, so naturally it wants to attract investment from all over the world. But then question comes, why did he specifically name India, that Indian projects must not get delayed and they should get all the clearances in due time? Because they wants to balance what happened at Hambantota by the docking of Chinese ship. So one is investment, job creation, and another is assuaging India's illness, because something like that this had happened in case of Colombo Eastern Container Terminal, that was supposed to be developed by India and Japan. But because of Chinese objection, suddenly Sri Lanka said that no, you cannot develop it. Then India started saying that you are going against your international obligations, etc., etc. Then Sri Lanka said that okay, not Eastern, develop the Western one. So this is an indication that we want that India must remain invested in us, India must remain engaged with us. More investment, naturally more demand, more job creation, and that is the only thing, that is the first thing that Sri Lanka needs today. And if India comes in a dominant position in Sri Lanka, that will be beneficial for India, but that will also create opportunities for Sri Lanka to negotiate better terms with China, because then there is a competitor. Okay, so that is the news from here. Then Masood Azhar is not in Pakistan and he can be in Afghanistan. This has been said by Pakistan, and Pakistan has said that we are going to arrest him, we are going to freeze his assets, we are going to put restrictions on all his activities, his organization's activities, etc., etc., etc. But then question comes, can Pakistan be trusted? And the answer is no. Why Pakistan is doing this? Just to get out of that FATF grey list. And yes, regarding that last week news, that $450 million worth of this support for F-16s to Pakistan, apart from over the horizon capabilities of USA, another purpose behind this support is that Pakistan was very much helpful in providing armaments or providing ammunitions and all to Ukraine. So this $450 million worth of support being given to Pakistan is being looked at as a reward for that support. And India raised objections with with USA as well, that why are you supplying armaments to Pakistan, that goes against our own interests. But at the same time with UK also, because an air bridge was created from UK, things will come to Pakistan, and in Pakistan also there are ammunition factories, and from Pakistan they will fly and they will go to Ukraine. So that $450 million worth of support was being looked as a reward for supporting Ukraine. Okay, next point. Armenia Azerbaijan clashes have re-erupted. We will be discussing this in coming slides. European Parliament calls Hungary an electoral autocracy. This is not the first time Hungary has been said so by the European Parliament. Perhaps this is third or fourth time. And Hungary's Hungary has vehemently rejected it. Viktor Orban, he has vehemently rejected it. That this is something they keep saying every other time. The point is that presently Hungary is taking Russian line. Hungary is saying that I have my own energy needs, so I am not going to tow EU's line, and rather than towing EU's line, I will continue to purchase energy from Russia. So naturally, this goes against the interest of European Union. And at the same time, Viktor Orban from Hungary, he is a populist leader. So this again shows the dysfunctionality of European Union. In the European Parliament, motion was passed by majority, but then they can do anything. They can't do anything. They cannot expel Hungary away, because first UK gone, then suppose you expel Hungary out, tomorrow it might be that Portugal or Greece, because they are economically not that much strong. They can ask for it, and ultimately EU will crumble. And even so, that is why this terming of Hungary as a hybrid electoral autocracy, that is of very little significance. That is something, what I should say, customary. So if a question comes regarding democratic backslide, it can be a very good question for PSIR students and even for non-PSIR students. In case of GS portion or in essay portion, there can be a question regarding democratic decline, because this term has been continuously used in case of India, that there is a democratic decline in India. So as an example, you can give reference of Hungary, that this is not a new phenomena, this is something that has been going on across the globe. Okay. Now the next one is annual summit of SCO in Samarkand, that we will be discussing, that what were the key points of the joint statement and what all did the Prime Minister say. Okay. And then quickly we will come to the questions. Highlights of SCO summit. The fun fact regarding this summit was that, one, they agreed that we will have a common list of terrorists, and then third time in 3 weeks has China objected at sanctioning of a terrorist in the UNSC. So you can mention this as area of divergence between India and China, that continuously China has objected to sanctioning of those terrorists that act against India. So this was third time in 3 weeks. Let us look at the joint statements. The members, they prepared a unified list of terrorists whose activities are banned in their territories. So SCO's area of interest we know about. You must have read about RATS, Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure. So now the nations have agreed to have a common list, so that all those specific terror groups, they are sanctioned, at least in this region. But again the question comes, will Pakistan and India be on common page? India would want Jamaat-ul-Dawa to be sanctioned, but Pakistan says that Jamaat-ul-Dawa is a charity organization and it causes no trouble within Pakistan. So that will show the dysfunctionality of this platform over the issue of terrorism. Okay, the next one is, this is related to CWC, Chemical Weapon Convention. Okay, to counter the threat of chemical and biological terrorism, comply with Chemical Weapon Convention regarding to production, stockpiling and use of chemical weapons. On Afghanistan, all nations are on common one page that there should be an inclusive government. On Iran, they said that honestly everyone should go for accepting JCPOA. This is a slant sly on USA, because all other nations, they are following the spirit of JCPOA, but under Donald Trump, US came out unilaterally. And presently the challenge is that I think I have discussed while discussing about Iran, that amount of material that Iran was permitted to process, it has increased by roughly 10 times. And the extent of enrichment, it was roughly permitted around 3% or so, and presently Iran has enriched it to more than 60%. And Iran has sufficient fissile material to develop its own nuclear bomb. So that is why US is talking about cutting it down. Iran has got its own set of objections, and Israel is continuously saying that this must not happen, otherwise we will be taking action. Another probable cause of next phase of instability within West Asia. Then creating a transparent international energy market and reducing the existing trade barriers. This is in the interest of Russia as well as in case of India, because we know that international energy market is not transparent. For Asian countries, Gulf nations, they put Asian premium. The method of sanctioning Russia, you are not seeking anyone's opinion, you are not taking nations into confidence, but you are sanctioning one of the biggest energy producers in the world. Naturally, there will be a fluctuation, and that is what the Western markets are suffering from right now. Next is need for inclusive reform of WTO and a more representative, democratic, just and multipolar world order. This last one, that is very common. Okay. Now, what did the Prime Minister say? Prime Minister did not say much. Most of it was that India is presently the biggest developing economy. We have done this, we have done that. These are our developmental goals, these are our targets, etc. But something that can be of interest to the students writing mains, I mean the next year. He said that to develop reliable and resilient supply chains, you must be remembering RSCI, Resilient Supply Chain Initiative, India, Australia and Japan. So initially that was being seen as, and in fact that was against China, because China dependent supply chains, they are very much vulnerable. So that is why India said that there should be a China plus one strategy. Other nations agreed, and India, Japan and Australia, they agreed for RSCI, Resilient Supply Chain Initiative. Now India is talking about the same supply chains here also. Why? Because India wants to create that balance, that we are focused on supply chains. That supply chain can be with China, that can be without China, we have absolutely no issues. But at the end of the day, we also know that China knows that if there is a China plus strategy, and if that plus one strategy succeeds, China's overall clout on global trade will naturally come down. Okay, so this was that balancing statement. But yes, while discussing, you can talk about SCO for resilient supply chains, because Prime Minister said that SCO nations, they should talk about, they should work for resilient and robust supply chain. Disruption caused by COVID-19 and Ukraine crisis, better connectivity, and this was for Pakistan, better connectivity and full rights of transit by member states in importance to achieve the developmental goals. This is with respect to Afghanistan. Because Pakistan has not been providing overland access for India to Afghanistan. That is why the Prime Minister brought in this issue, because connectivity is among the key areas of functioning of SCO. So this was another purpose, and then there was meeting with Turkish president and Russian president, and where Indian PM said that this is not the time of war, and this statement that was uploaded in the Western press. You can look for USA newspapers. They all said that India snubbed Russia, India snubbed Putin. And it's not just that India said so. Even when China and Russia, they were talking in the beginning, President Putin himself said that we are aware of your concerns and questions related to Ukraine crisis, and I will be explaining that to you. So ultimately, China has also shown its displeasure with respect to Ukraine crisis, because even China is hurting, India is hurting, and these are the two nations that are presently, I should not say the term backers, but these are the two biggest nations who are not in Western camps, who are not anti-Russia. So that is why China and India matter. And when China and India both raised this point in their meeting with President Putin, and that was raised publicly. So let us see what happens, because presently we have seen that Russia has suffered some losses. Its troops had to go back, but no need to read about that. The day something important happens in case of Russian-Ukraine crisis, I shall be explaining it in detail to you. Okay. So now let us look at Nagorno-Karabakh region, Armenian crisis. You see, this is a vestige of Cold War. I think this should be sufficiently clear to you. This simply means that this is the Nagorno-Karabakh region. This is Armenia, and all these regions, they were also in Armenian control, but in recent times Azerbaijan took it back. And this is that small corridor that links Armenia with Nagorno-Karabakh. And yes, let us look at a bit of history and what is the interesting development in case of Nagorno-Karabakh. The dispute goes back to Cold War era. In 1988, a demand emerged from this region, and the importance of this region is that though this region is in Azerbaijan, but the people are ethnic Armenians. So there was a demand in 1988 that we should be permitted by ethnic from Karabakh Armenians, that we should be permitted to go to Soviet Armenia rather than Soviet Azerbaijan, because at that time all this region that was part of USSR. Then what happens? In 1990s, conflict starts, and around 94 or 95, I have written it down, a ceasefire agreement was signed. But recently, around I think 2016 also and 2020 also, conflicts have been recurring. Armenia, it is a smaller nation. Azerbaijan, you can just look at the map, it is a much bigger nation. Azerbaijan, it is supported by Turkey. Okay. And for Armenia, it has got a security relationship, security arrangement with Russia. And in Armenia, there is also a Russian base. So when the conflict erupted in 2020, Armenia demanded for support. But Russia said that we are not going to intervene in this area. If there is any threat to your territorial integrity, we are going to support. Because the present status of Nagorno-Karabakh is that de-jure, as per the law, as per the international law, it is with Azerbaijan, but de facto, in reality, it is being controlled by Armenian supported rebels. Okay. And for Russia, the point is that it has a defense cooperation with Armenia, and in Armenia there is also a military base of Russia. But this nation, it is energy wise very rich, and Russia is interested in cultivating its relationship. For Azerbaijan, it is being supported by Turkey, and Azerbaijan is important for us as well, because this is Caspian Sea, and if you remember INSTC, its maritime route that will cross this region, but its overall land route was supposed to cross Azerbaijan, from Azerbaijan to Iran, from Russia to Azerbaijan to Iran, and then back to Arabian Sea to JNPT. That is the suggested route of INSTC. So that is another factor why Azerbaijan becomes important. But there are some issues, and just look at the situation of this Nagorno-Karabakh, and you will find similarity with Kashmir, because they are ethnic Armenians, and Pakistan also claims that since Kashmir is a Muslim majority, as per the division, it should have come to us. So just here it is a ethnic linkage, but there, in case of Kashmir issue, it is that religious linkage. So, and we have got better relations with Armenia rather than Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan, it has mostly supported Pakistan, it also has military relationship with Pakistan. So point here is, if we go for supporting Armenia, then naturally by the same principle Pakistan will say that in case of Nagorno-Karabakh, if you were supporting Armenia, that justifies Pakistan's interference in Jammu and Kashmir. Because Armenia has got ethnic linkages, Armenia is interfering in within Azerbaijan. So similarly, we have also got religious linkages with Kashmir. So we will also be doing it right if we are interfering in Kashmir. And since we do not have very good relation with Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan is along with Turkey, along with Pakistan, so naturally we cannot support Azerbaijan line of argument, because we have got good relations with Armenia but not with Azerbaijan. As a result, and what has been the template, we are saying that do not go for conflict, resolve it through dialogue, resolve it through diplomacy. That has been our constant stance. Okay, so this was Nagorno-Karabakh dispute. Its details they are mentioned in the coming slide. Okay, in a nutshell, Nagorno-Karabakh de facto with Armenia, de jure with Azerbaijan. This is the nutshell. Then India better relation with Armenia, Azerbaijan inclined towards Pakistan. Another area of difference. We cannot openly support Armenia. Why? Because then our case with respect to Kashmir or our claim that Pakistan is continuously interfering in Kashmir, that will get weakened because Pakistan will use this argument to support that. And we cannot support Azerbaijan because we have got good relations with Armenia. So, in nutshell, this is the Nagorno-Karabakh dispute. History: last decade of Cold War, Karabakh Armenians, they said that we want to go with Soviet Armenians rather than Soviet Azerbaijan, led to full-scale war in early 1990s. Then there was a ceasefire agreement. This was brokered by Russia. Recurring conflicts 2016-2020. Armenia, it has got a Russian base, strong economic and military ties with Russia. Azerbaijan, it has got deeper connection with Turkey, rich in energy, and Russia wants to develop relations. Okay. Okay. And yes, this linkage, this is Lachin corridor. So in case prelims there is a question that Lachin corridor connects which region or between which nations, then the answer is Armenia and Azerbaijan. Remember Nagorno-Karabakh, Lachin corridor that links Nagorno-Karabakh with Armenia. Okay. Now the time for Mains 2022 IR questions. But before I go to this question, you see, in case of GS, approaching IR and approaching other subjects, there is a lot of difference. Because in case of other subjects or other topics, you can read a specific current topic and you can say, okay, this specific topic I have read and now I can write the answer. But in case of IR, you cannot say that, okay, this is the topic, I have read it. That's all. Because what is happening at present, that will be hardly 5%. Most of the, the 95%, that will be related to what has happened in the past, the history of relationship, the geopolitics, geoeconomics, the geostrategy along all this. And that is why when I started teaching international relations for mains, rather than discussing specific issues of recent times, I went for a detailed coverage of all those topics. Whosoever is the student, was the student of Target Mains 2022 of Level Up IAS, you can meet him, you can ask them. They had detailed notes, not much detailed, but every topic in roughly 2 to 3 pages. But that would be covering the whole gamut of topics and issues, so that I was confident that in case a question comes, students won't feel out of place. They will be understanding and they can easily answer it. So when I saw the first 3 questions, question number 9, 10 and 19, I was relieved. Yes, regarding question 20, I had not thought that geopolitics of climate change can be asked in GS. I had a thinking that this can be a potential question for PSIR students in the IR segment, but I had not thought this. So that is why I am plainly saying you, as a specific topic, I had not discussed this. But yes, climate change was naturally portion of all the other topics. Like in case of India, China, climate change, area of convergence. In case of USA, climate change, area of potential area of convergence, but area of divergence. Why? Because of USA's demand. Then with in South Asia, with Central Asia, with Australia, Japan, Indian Ocean region, climate change was discussed. But specifically geopolitics of climate change, I am accepting I had not discussed this as a specific topic. Rest all they had been discussed. But yes, from this year, naturally this will be part of the notes. Geopolitics of climate change, and it's not difficult. We just have to remember what we said at Kyoto, CBDRRC, then what we accepted at Paris, then what happened at Glasgow. That is one line of argument. Then what are the other steps that India is taking? Other steps are TDRI. Okay. Then International Solar Alliance. One Sun, One World, One Grid. All these initiatives, and from here you have to say that India is taking a leadership role in tackling climate change, because that will help us in strengthening our relationship with the small SIDC, small island developing countries. So these are those specific bits of information that I had discussed while discussing IOR in detail. I had discussed Indian Ocean region. So naturally small island developing countries was part of it. CDRI, International Solar Alliance, everything was discussed. But yes, geopolitics of climate change specifically was not. But I do believe that I had explained them sufficiently and they had understood it even better, so that they could have picked up those specific bits of information to arrange them in a manner so that they could have answered this question. Okay. Now let us go to the first question. And this is the screenshot from my tab or iPad, whatever you say. And I have simply, these are my Word document notes, and that is why you cannot see the level up watermark behind them, because I could not find those watermarked notes. Okay. So what was the question? The question was, and just look at it, how simple these questions were. There was nothing complex here. There was nothing too much challenging that could have troubled any of the students. The first was, India is an age-old friend of Sri Lanka. So naturally, even in case of India-Sri Lanka relations, I had given that specific introduction, that a shared culture, a shared geography, a shared history. So all that shows that an age-old friend of Sri Lanka and substantiated. Next comes, discuss India's role in recent crisis in Sri Lanka in the light of preceding statements. That since India is an age-old friend of Sri Lanka, what is India's role? And what did my notes say? First, this was discussed in detail about the economic crisis, what has happened and what are the reasons for it. This portion not at all needed, because the question is that discuss India's role. What was India's role? That is mentioned over here. $3 billion worth of support, sidelines of Quad, India and Japan agreed, and India has also helped us supported Sri Lanka in its negotiation with IMF, and in this you can mention that timely supply of energy, then medicines, then food you could have mentioned. But after that, India's role you should have also mentioned that what are the challenges, and these are the challenges that in the past, image of interfering in Sri Lanka's internal affairs, and we have a very limited financial capacity. Decision regarding 13th amendment, something that we discussed just in a while. Okay, spillover of refugees and protest regarding this, and then what should be the suggestion, and that suggestion would be yes, that suggestion would be this much. Suggestions, you see, in suggestions I had said that since it is a challenge, divide it into short term and long term, something I say in case of ethics also while discussing case studies, that what immediate steps you would take and what long term steps you would take. Similarly here also in suggestions, short term and long term. Okay, and one of the question that was, how does this crisis present an opportunity for India to re-energize its neighborhood first policy? So with this statement you could have ended the answer, because while teaching also I have said in the previously that mention that specific policy, that what is the policy with respect to that particular region. Since Sri Lanka is in India's neighborhood in South Asia, so this can be an opportunity for India to re-energize its neighborhood first policy, and with that question would have ended. Absolutely comfortably you could have handled this question, no doubts regarding that. Okay, so now let us look at question number 2, and regarding this question number 2, and you see similarly just like India, Sri Lanka, we had also discussed India, Nepal, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all these regions, so that any question from anywhere you should be able to handle this, and we were able to complete all that along with UN, then diaspora, refugees, all that just in 10 days. But yes, the questions were, the classes were roughly 4 hours long, 3.5 to 4 hours long, that I would not deny. Classes were longer. BIMSTEC is a parallel organization like the SAARC. The comparison between BIMSTEC and SAARC, that is not here, but I had dictated that in the class. Naturally, I had discussed all these 3 organizations, SAARC, BIMSTEC, IURA, and naturally when I discussed SAARC and BIMSTEC, I had done a comparative analysis of both these organizations. Okay, and I had said in the class that never term this as a parallel organization, never say that BIMSTEC can replace SAARC. So no, it is not a, BIMSTEC is not a parallel organization like SAARC, because parallel means one can replace the other, but BIMSTEC charter itself says that it will supplement other efforts rather than replacing any. So if the charter says, it means that you cannot claim that BIMSTEC can replace SAARC. And naturally, you see, SAARC is related to whole of South Asia, but BIMSTEC is specific to the region around the littoral states of Bay of Bengal region. So no, it is not, both are regional organizations. One is around Bay of Bengal, another is in South Asia. But it is not a parallel organization. Why? Because membership different, there is difference in membership, there is difference in the geography. In case of SAARC, all South Asian nations, but in case of BIMSTEC, there are 5 South Asian nations and 2 Southeast Asian nations. Okay? So, no, it is not a parallel organization, and don't worry, all this was explained to the students in detail in the class. Everything was explained in detail. If you meet anyone, you can ask them, you can look into their notes, and I had said them continuously that please write it down, please write it down. What most of them would do, that whatever handouts were given to them, they would start scribbling it there only. I said that please get a separate piece of notebook. I hope that they had noted it down and they had revised and they would have performed well. Okay, that is the only thing I would wish for them. What are the areas of similarities and dissimilarities between the two? Similarities: regional organization, membership, developing nations, purpose of development, climate change areas of concern. So all these will be similarities. And dissimilarities: in case of dissimilarities, first of all, membership, just as I explained, then geography, then it would be purpose. So all that will be dissimilarities. And next, the third part of the question is, how are Indian foreign policy objectives realized by forming this new organization? So what is that new organization? If you take hint from the question, since the first part of the question is BIMSTEC, perhaps you can think that question is about BIMSTEC. And in reality, this third part is about BIMSTEC, because SAARC came into existence in 1985 and BIMSTEC into 1997. So naturally, this is the newer organization. And yes, I am not claiming from where or from what topic this question came, because yes, in 5th summit meeting in Colombo, for the first time BIMSTEC charter that was signed. But I do not go into such issue. While discussing IR, and this time also we'll try to have a separate module for IR, we discuss each topic in detail. And as part of that particular topic, suppose yes, we will discuss India-Pakistan in detail, and DGMO agreement on ceasefire will be a part of that topic. That will not be the main topic. We will discuss India-China in detail, and yes, recent border disengagements, that will be a part of it. That will not be the whole topic, because by just that one piece of information you cannot write a complete answer. Your answer will naturally be one dimensional only. I have said this repeatedly, that your answer need a broad set of dimensions. Okay, so this one, how India's foreign policy objectives are realized. So this is the significance is the foreign policy objectives. What is alternative to SAARC? Yet again, it is not a parallel. Alternative to SAARC means regional engagement at a time when SAARC is dysfunctional. Opportunity for India to claim its regional leadership. Okay, then bridge between South Asia and ASEAN, and South Asia and ASEAN you could also mention connects neighborhood policy with Act East policy. Okay, then yes, in fact it is written. Regional leadership already discussed restricting China in the Bay of Bengal region, and we know that Kyaukpyu, yes, China is at Kyaukpyu in Myanmar. So if India goes for deep engagements with Myanmar, with Thailand, with Bangladesh, there can be arrangement where China can be restricted, because everyone knows that if China comes into the region, it will be a source of instability. So restricting China in the Bay of Bengal region, and naturally you can mention about maritime security, traditional and non-traditional security threats, HDRI, humanitarian, and HADR, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, and these are just so this was some specific piece of information you could okay. So this is how through these notes you could have handled those questions very easily. Question number 3. I don't know how many of you were comfortable with it or how many of you were not very much comfortable with it. But yes, how will I2U2 grouping transform India's position in the global politics? And look at the question. Recent, and this was a question that had been discussed in the class. Recent events in West Asia indicate towards regions yearning for peace. Highlight the significance of I2U2, discuss the benefits it can bring to India. Here the question is benefits it can bring to India, and what UPSC had asked was how it can transform India's position in the global politics. So almost same question. This question had been discussed in the class. Naturally, all the questions that were mentioned, all of them were discussed in the class, and pointers were given to the student. Even in some of the questions I had mentioned about some of the explained some of the points, dictated to them, introduction, what you can write, conclusion, what you can write, everything was done. So yes, after this I am somewhat satisfied, I would say. Not completely, because fourth one I could not. I'll accept that. But yes, for the next batch, geopolitics of climate change will be a topic for discussion, and I will explain it in complete detail. Geopolitics of climate change, then geopolitics of global trade, all of this. Because if UPSC can ask that question, they can ask any sort of question. Okay. So, how does it increase India's stake? Though that has been discussed in the class. Point you can mention from here, which are the points? Bring stability to the region. Presence of India underscores acceptance of India's stakes in the West Asia, and this will give India greater maneuvering space in the region. And yes, with this attach some other points, that Haifa port that has been acquired by Adani Group. The purpose is that whatever product goes from India, that would directly go to Saudi Arabia, and from Saudi Arabia to Israel there will be a rail connectivity, unloaded there by rail across the land, and from Haifa port directly to the Eastern and Western Europe, I mean European nations. So ultimately the purpose is to bypass which strait is that? Between Red Sea and oh, come on, it just slipped out of my mind there. Yes, bypass Suez Canal. Because few days back also we saw when a ship got stuck, what happened? Almost whole of global trade that was in disarray. So this is an attempt not only to ensure India's presence in the West Asia and a greater linkage between West Asia, particularly the Gulf nations, and India as well as Israel. So this I2U2 grouping, look at that in this regard. Okay. Now let us go to the, and yes, I am not giving you explicit answers because of specific fact that I am just explaining that what all are mentioned. You have to practice these questions. Practice it. Okay. Next is clean energy is the order of the day. You would explain why it is order of the day, because of climate change and emphasis upon reducing carbon footprints. That is one aspect. And second is need for economic development, job creation and prosperity. Okay. So due to these two factors, it is order of the day. Describe briefly India's changing policy towards climate change in various international fora in the context of geopolitics. So what you would say, why clean energy is significant? Already I have explained. Evolution of India's policy. So first during Kyoto it was CBDRRC. Then what happened? At Paris we took commitments. Then at Glasgow we increased our commitments. So this shows how India's this has changed. Now next comes, and this is the most important, otherwise suppose had this word geopolitics not been there, this would have been a question for paper 3 climate change, that how India's policy has changed with respect to climate change. But when it talks about geopolitics, geopolitics means what? Not that it is not only about climate change, but it is also the politics of climate change. So India is now trying to assert its leadership both with the developed nations as well as among the developing nations, small island nations. Because when India as a developing nation, it says that we are going to take some serious commitments with respect to climate change, it means that India is concerned about those small island developing nations. So that naturally gives India leadership. Next, India also finds a new ground for engaging with the developed nations because they are more concerned about climate change. Then third is related to technological transfer and economic development, because with these new technologies, new innovations, there will be job creation, there will be demand, there will be a new set of manufacturing line, and ultimately India's exports would increase. And apart from all that, what is another very important aspect is that India is trying to create its own niche space. And how is India trying to do that? Through International Solar Alliance. Then one sun, one world, one grid. So first, India is engaging with a diverse set of nations, with small island developing nations, by taking very serious commitments. With developed nations also, it is engaging. Then it is also creating its own niche space, its own leadership. Then on the front of technology, it is continuously engaging with Nordic states, European nations like Germany and France. Climate change is among the key areas of engagement, key areas of cooperation. With China, climate change is among areas of cooperation. So like this, by picking some specific pieces of information, I am confident that students would have been easily able to handle this. However, since I did not mention it directly in the notes, I do feel a bit about it, and from next time it will be part of the note. Okay. So that's all for today's class. There are no questions because I want you to practice these questions only. And please try to look at the pattern, look at the type of question. The questions are dynamic. You just cannot look at some specific magazines, booklets, and you can write down the answer. You will have to understand the demand of the question and answer accordingly. Okay. So that is why this initiative, that you should be able to understand things, and once you understand, it becomes very easy to answer all these questions. However, in case if you have got any concern, any doubts, or any other suggestions, it's the same Telegram group. IR this week. You can mention here whatever your suggestions are, your questions are, or what should I say, if you want something else to be added and all, if possible, it will be done, because ultimately it is for the benefit of you all. Okay. So I hope today's students, they have got their paper 3 and paper 4. Hope they do well. And that's all for today. Do practice the questions, the 4 questions. Please write them down and discuss them with your friends. Okay. Thank you very much.